Hey, welcome everybody to another Thursday night cheer with the understanding of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the insights of the Orach Chaim on this week's parsha. This week's parsha is Parshas Behaalotecha. Fun fact: it's my bar mitzvah parsha, so I'm familiar with some of the psukim here and there. So here we go. It should be a wonderful evening learning about a story that you're all familiar with, but we have been taught how to understand it in a very specific way, and we're going to see an entirely different picture how the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains it. I will share with you my screen so you can see the psukim inside. Let's see if this works. There's something. Okay, 1 second. Due to just because everything is new for the computer, the sharing ability. Here we go. Let's get the allow application. Use password. Okay. And let's see if that worked it. We may have to, let's try one more time, see if we can share. It's going to work anyway. We don't have to restart. Perfect. Okay, Baruch Hashem, here we go. This is what we have. Let's take a look at the psukim over here, and then we will get to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. So the Torah tells us at the end of the parsha, Vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon b'Moshe, Al odos ha'isha akushes asher lokach ki isha chushes lokach. So the Torah tells us about Miriam and Aharon, Moshe Rabbeinu's brother and sister. They start talking about Moshe and what had happened, and the fact that he took a Cushi woman. Now, really, we know Rashi tells us the way to understand this is that Moshe Rabbeinu had married Tzipora, and what happened was, after Har Sinai, after Hashem gave us the Torah, Hashem said, "Okay, everybody can go back to their homes and they can be with their wives again." And Hashem told Moshe, "But you, Ata Poi Amodi Madi, you're going to stay with me." And Moshe understood that from here on in, he was not to live with his wife. So he separated from his wife, and therefore the Miriam and Aharon were discussing how can it be that Moshe would go ahead and distance himself from his wife. Vayomeru, and they said, "Harak ach Moshe diber Hashem." Did Hashem only speak to Moshe? Hello, gambano diber vayishma Hashem. Hashem spoke to us as well. So what Rashi tells us what this means is that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu separated is because he knew that he would be called upon to talk to Hashem at any time. He was a prophet, he was a Navi, and Hashem could talk to him at any time. And therefore, he was worried that he would be impure. And therefore, he wanted to stay pure as much as possible. So Miriam and Aaron complained and said, we also at Har Sinai, when we got the Torah, the entire Jewish nation all became prophets. Every single person became a prophet, men, women, and children. And therefore, since they also were prophets, they said, we should also, why is he being so strict on himself? Hashem spoke to us as well, and we didn't do that. So why should it be that Moshe is doing this? The Ish Moshe, and Hashem heard what Miriam and Aaron were saying. The Ish Moshe Anav Ma'od. Moshe was a humble person. We call ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama, from all people on the earth. Vayomer Hashem pisam el Moshe ve'el Aaron ve'el Miriam, and Hashem calls out to Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam suddenly. Come to the tent, to the Ohel Moed. Vayetzu shloshem, and they go out. Vayered Hashem ba'amud anon, and what happens is Hashem comes and he tells Aaron and Miriam, how can you talk about Moshe this way? He says, Shemuna Devarai in Yenediachem Hashem b'marei laves vada b'chalama daberbo. If I want to talk to you, or any other prophet for that matter, the way I talk to them is in a vision, or it's in a dream. However, lo chein avdi Moshe, my servant Moshe is not the same. B'chol beisi ne'emanu, he is the most trusted in my household. Pe'el daberbo, I talk to him directly, mouth to mouth. With clarity, no riddles. They'll see an image of Hashem, which obviously doesn't mean literally Hashem. We can't see Hashem, but they'll see some sort of image. Why aren't you afraid? Why weren't you afraid to talk about my servant Moshe? That is what Hashem says, and what happens is Hashem gets angry. Hashem gets angry, and he leaves from Aaron and Miriam. And we know that the Rashi tells us that when Hashem got angry, what you see from here is you can't get angry at a person until you first explain to them what they did wrong. So first, Hashem told them what they had done wrong. They shouldn't have been talking the way we're taught to understand that they spoke lashon hara, they spoke evil speech about Moshe, and therefore they are punished. What was the punishment? Hashem's cloud left the tent, left the ohel. Miriam was white like snow from Mitzorah, from Tzoras. Aaron el Miriam Mitzoras, and Aaron turned and behold, Miriam was a Mitzorah. She had Tzoras, and we know that Aaron also had. We learned that Aaron also had Tzoras, and his went away fairly quickly, but Miriam's stuck around a little bit longer. The reason why Miriam stuck around longer is because she was the one that brought up the conversation. And Hashem, what does Aaron do? He tells Moshe, please be Adoni, please my master, al natoshe salinu chatos, don't get angry at us, don't hold us accountable, asher na'alu asher chatonu, we have been foolish and we have sinned. Al noti kames, and please help us out. Yitzhak Moshe al Hashem, Moshe calls out to Hashem, Lamar saying, Kel na refan Allah, please Hashem, heal Miriam. Yomer Hashem al Moshe, and then what happens is we know that Hashem says, okay, you know what? Miriam's going to be kept out of the camp for 7 days, and then she'll become pure, and then she can come back. And that is pretty much the end of the story. The entire Jewish nation waits for Miriam for her to finish her purification process. And Rashi tells us the reason why we waited is because the same way she waited for Moshe while he was put into the Nile to see what would happen to him. So in that merit, the entire nation waited for her to be ready to come back into the camp before traveling again. Yeah. That is the psukim of this story where Moshe and Aaron, Miriam and Aaron speak, lashon hara, so to speak, about, no pun intended, about Moshe, and therefore Miriam is punished by being sent out of the camp. This is the standard way. Everybody learns these psukim this way. The Orach Chaim has an unbelievably novel understanding in this story. And he says as follows. He says, maybe what happened here really is that Moshe, Miriam and Aaron, they weren't talking behind Moshe's back. They weren't saying a story behind him. Rather, they were telling it in front of him. And it's logical to say such a thing. It makes a lot of sense to say that that's what was happening, that their intention was they were speaking directly in front of Moshe. Now, why might that be? Why would they speak directly? Just make sure I got the right piece. Yeah, here we go. What's the reason that they would speak directly in front of Moshe? Is because you don't just talk about people behind your back. We're talking about Aharon and Miriam. These are great, great people beyond our comprehension. And they would just, off the cuff, talk negatively about their brother. Can't be. So therefore, what would it help for them to talk about something negative between the two of themselves? What were they doing? They were rebuking Moshe. They were telling Moshe, you're doing something. The who shomem, he lost him, and he was listening. And look at that. It says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this is, you can, Chazal say this in Sifri. When it says, Vayishma Hashem, Vayish Moshe, Pirush Gam Hu Shama. So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, let's look back at the beginning of the story. It says that Miriam and Aaron were talking to each other. And it says that they said, did Moshe only speak, Hashem only speak to Moshe? Hello, he spoke to us too. And Vayishma Hashem, to us, there's a period right over there. And Hashem heard what Miriam and Aaron were saying. However, the Sifri says, move the period a little bit further down. And it says, Vayishma Hashem v'ha'ish Moshe, period. Put the period over there. And there's almost another way to read the connection of these two psukim is to say that Hashem and Moshe heard. Now, how did Moshe hear? Because they were talking right in front of him. They weren't going behind his back, and having a conversation to try and just be negative about somebody. They did it because they said, Moshe, we need to help you out. There's like an intervention. We're your brother and sister. We want to make sure that you know something. You have to understand. You've taken a stance here. You've separated from your wife. What's going on? Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. So now, what's wrong with that? What would be wrong with Moshe Rabbeinu separating himself from his wife? What's the big deal? Okay, people they understood Moshe was a very holy Jew, and people that oftentimes are the higher levels of their service to Hashem, they take on certain things that other people might not do. That's normal. So why were they suddenly so worried about Moshe Rabbeinu? So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Harak ach b'Moshe Rabbeinu said Zechron Livracha Amru. Our rabbis teach us achin berakin miutin. Whenever it says the word ach, like this word over here, and rak, that word in the Torah, it's coming to exclude something. Okay, in the Torah it says the exact words of the pasuk. Vayomru, they said harak only, ach only b'Moshe diber Hashem. Did Hashem speak to Moshe? Did Hashem only speak to Moshe? What's with the two words that are coming to exclude something? So it says the kan niskavnu lomer bezeh shemaisa Moshe yirshom hapagam bahem. Moshe Rabbeinu's actions, this was their tochacha, this was their rebuke. They were telling Moshe, your actions are going to spell something negative for us. And gamba avos ha'olam asher diber imam Hashem. And the previous generations, even our forefathers who Hashem spoke to them. Meaning by you taking this extra stance of separating from your wife because you want to be more strict on yourself, you're making everybody else that came before you that spoke to Hashem look bad. Because look, Abraham didn't separate from his wife. Yitzchak didn't separate from his wife. Yaakov didn't separate but you, Moshe, come along and you're separating? You're making everybody else look bad. The Chein hu b'midrash, and the Orach Chaim says, I can prove it to you again from a medrash. The Zelashonam, v'halo gam im ha'avos diber adkad. The medrash says that not just us, but even with the avos, Hashem spoke, and they didn't separate themselves, and therefore their challenge to Moshe is, and their rebuke to Moshe is, it's one thing to take onto yourself a certain stringency that's different than other people. But if that stringency is going to now be rubbed in other people's faces and it's going to look bad for them, so now you got to be a little bit more careful. It's not just, it doesn't work that way. And therefore, said Miriam and Aaron straight out to Moshe Rabbeinu. They told him directly, maybe this is not the right path. Maybe what you've done was a mistake. So now what happened? What was the reaction? The Orach Chaim keeps going. We're not going to see every single line. But now Hashem hears what Aaron and Miriam are telling Moshe. Vayishma Hashem. So now why does it say Vayishma Hashem and Hashem heard? Naturally Hashem heard. There's no question about it. So now what happens? Imagine two siblings, they're fighting, or three siblings in this case, they're fighting, and two siblings gang up on the other one, and they tell him you're doing this, that, and the other. What does the sibling do? How does the sibling defend himself? He runs to his parents. Say, Mom, Dad, this is not fair. Look what they're doing. Right? They're bothering me. It's not right. So what could Moshe have done? Moshe could have gone and told Hashem, listen, I did this because I thought it was right, or you told me to do this. We'll see soon whose idea was exactly. But I did this because of I thought it was a good thing. But now look, Miriam and Aaron, they're complaining to me. They're getting on my case. What do I do? So it says the Torah, Lomar, why does it say Vayishma Hashem? To tell us Shelo Shama Ela Hashem. Hakavana B'zeh Shelo Dibrei B'fnei Beria. That they didn't say this in front of anybody. Nobody heard this. Only Hashem was the only one who heard this. They were so private about it. And Od Niskaven, it also tells us Shemehem Shama V'lo that Hashem heard from them and not from Moshe. Because Moshe did not complain in front of Hashem, which is the normal way for people that get slighted or get insulted. They go and complain to somebody else. So two things why it says Vayishma Hashem. Number one, Moshe could have said, oh man, now they're getting down. I'm going to go complain to Hashem. Nope. Moshe said, no, I don't have to complain. I don't have to put them under the bus. And also, Hashem, they were so private. Miriam and Aaron were very careful not to just wantonly talk about somebody else negatively. They were doing it with the intention of rebuking Moshe, helping him out, and also very private. Not that there's nobody else in the world that heard. Only Hashem heard. So the Torah tells us next that Moshe Rabbeinu was anav me'od mikol adam asher pnei adama. Moshe was a great, unbelievably humble person, right? So what is that doing over here? Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, v'hodia hakasav zekan. The Torah is telling us this here. Lefi ma shekasavnu shedibru b'fanav, that they're based on what we're saying, that they spoke to Moshe himself. Nasan hakasav ta'am shehutzrach Hashem lasas kol ha'omer be'inyan. So now the Torah is explaining to us why everything had to transpire. Mi'atam ki ha'ish Moshe anav me'od. Moshe was a very humble person. U'tzad anvusai, because of his humility, nimna mehashav lahem teshuva hamischayeves lavei be'inyan. He did not explain to them anything. He didn't Moshe Rabbeinu because he was humble. He did not feel he didn't have to stand up for himself. He didn't have to justify himself. He didn't have to explain himself. It's okay, I understand. You have your opinion. I don't want to fight. I'm not special. You're right. I'm not trying to make myself be special. And therefore, he was quiet. Now, what he could have told says, you don't understand, brother and sister. Hashem talks to me differently than the way he might talk to anybody else. Hashem talks to me. Then with the prophecy that Moshe gets is entirely different. That would have been a very simple defense that Moshe could have given. The dictate loymar mikol ha'adam asher al pnei adam ha'adama lahachlit minias hatshuva mimenu be'inyan ki adam shebedaituhu lamata chas v'shalom mikol asher al pnei adama eich yeshur chas v'shalom sheomer tshuva sheyetim menish hu golden mikol anavim. This is exactly why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't give that answer. You know why he didn't say? Because I can explain to you. My prophecy is different. I have a prophecy where I talk directly to Hashem. You know why? Because he was anav mikol adam. From everybody, he was more humble. Meaning he wasn't going to give an answer that now showed people that he was actually greater. By him defending himself, he would have been putting himself up on a pedestal and saying, look, well, I understand your complaint, but Hashem talks to me. I'm a great guy. He talks to me differently than he talks to you. And that would have raised himself up. And therefore, he had to be quiet the entire time. And therefore, Hashem is the one who has to intervene and bring together Miriam and Aaron for them to understand what's going on. That's why Hashem calls out to Miriam and Aaron suddenly. Well, just fast forward a little bit to get to a different point. That's why it says Hashem says to Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, Pisayim, suddenly. Oh, okay. I got to step in over here. Says Hashem, I have to step in and defend for Moshe because he's not going to do it himself. He's too humble. He's not too humble. He is very humble. And therefore, he's not going to say the things that they have to understand. And therefore, Hashem comes and he wants to talk to Miriam and Aaron. He tells Miriam and Aaron that the way he talks to them is different. Why does Hashem say, Lo chen avdi Moshe? My servant Moshe is different. Why can't I say Lo chen Moshe? Moshe is different. What's with Avdi, my servant Moshe? So says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, very interesting idea. It says as follows. Let's get down to the right spot. Here it is, coming up. Oh, that's the thing, I skipped it. Oh no, here we go. Coming right up. I love this vanda. Oh no, I did skip it. Sorry. Lochein Avdi Moshe, not so is my servant Moshe. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh has a discussion. He says, my question is, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, what status did Moshe Rabbeinu have? Moshe Rabbeinu, on some level, could have been had a status of a king. Now, some people, according to some opinions, Moshe Rabbeinu had the status of a king, and the halacha is a king, melech shemachal al kvoidai, a king who is moichel, who gives up, he lets go on his honor. Ein kvodo machal, his kavod is not ignored. Meaning, a father, we know that in order to respect our fathers, to give honor to our fathers, we can't sit in their seat. It's an example. But if a father wants to give up on his kavod, on his honor, and say, my son, you can sit in my seat. A father has the right to do that. We have the right to give our child permission. Go ahead, sit in my seat. And similarly, a teacher, or a master, or a rebbe has the right to do that for his students. However, a king does not have the right to do that. If a king would say, you can go ahead and sit in my throne, then the halacha is we would not listen to the king in that fashion. And rather, we would not be allowed to sit on the throne, because we're still mandated to have honor for the king, even if he's saying, I don't want to have, I can give up on the honor. So Moshe Rabbeinu himself says Hashem, Lochein Avdi Moshe. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the exact words in the Orach Chaim. So Lochein Avdi Moshe. Not so is my servant Moshe. The Chazal teach us, we're taught, says the Orach Chaim, that Eved Melech, the servant of a king, is Kemelech, has the status of a king in certain areas. And therefore, Hashem is telling Miriam and Aaron, my servant Moshe is no different in that regard, because he's like a king. And he doesn't have the right to give up on his kavod. So for him, from his position, he's going to give up because he sees himself as a very humble person, and he's not going to do anything. And therefore, from him, there'd be no reason for me to punish you, because he would forgive you in a heartbeat. But Lochein Avdi Moshe, Moshe is my servant. He's my servant, which makes him, he has the status of a king. And since he has the status of a king, and therefore there's going to have to be some sort of punishment that is going to occur. That's why it says, Adaberbo. Hashem talks to Moshe mouth to mouth, directly without any riddles. Umadulo Yerasim, why did you not fear Ladaber to speak? Moshe, again, it says, the servant of Hashem, my servant Moshe Rabbeinu, to let them know that it's true. Moshe, from his perspective, no punishment would happen. But because Eved Melech, the Eved of a king, is like a king, so therefore I am not going to be lenient on his kavod, and I'm going to punish you for what you've done. And that's why, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, take a look. We see that Moshe Rabbeinu davens for Miriam. It says, Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem, davens for Miriam. Lamor saying, Kel, Hashem, no, please, Rafan Allah, heal her. Now, the way it works when, let's call him Ruvain, insults Shimon, the way that Ruvain gets a kapara, he gets his atonement, the way he's freed from any punishment from Hashem or anything like that, is if he goes to Ruvain and says, and if Ruvain goes to Shimon and says, please forgive me, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I apologize for what I said about you or I said to you, please forgive me for my mistake. And if that's the case, if that's the only trigger that's necessary to come about for Reuben's forgiveness, so what should Miriam have done? Miriam should have talked to Moshe. Moshe, you forgive me. What are you davening? Don't daven to Hashem. You forgive me, Moshe. So it says Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Moshe had to forgive. He was never upset to begin with. Hashem was the one that was being particular about Moshe Rabbeinu's honor. And therefore, Moshe has to turn to Hashem to daven. Kel na Rafan Allah, please daven for heal her. And that's where you see it, though it didn't work right away because Hashem had to make a point and let it be known that you can't just say things, even if it's in a sense of respect, be very, very careful to Moshe Rabbeinu and treat him very, very carefully. This is the some of the pieces of the insight of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh on this, let's call it a story. Now, just to review the story, and we'll get to one of the lessons that comes out of this, is that the simple understanding, the way we're always taught, as the story goes, is that Miriam and Aaron spoke Lashon Hara. They spoke negatively about Moshe, and therefore Hashem heard about it, and he punished Miriam and Aaron for talking about Moshe. But here we see, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, that Miriam and Aaron weren't talking Lashon Hara. They were rebuking their own brother and saying, you're making a mistake here. You're being too strict on yourself, and it's coming at a price on everybody else, and you can't do that to even Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And therefore, you have to fix this, and you have to make sure that you make amends, so to speak. So Hashem, the mistake that Miriam and Aaron made was they looked at Moshe as just like another person, another prophet, an Eved, even a servant. However, their mistake was that he was the Eved of the king of Hashem. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu's humility did not allow him to be bothered or even say a response. And that's why Hashem intervened, and Hashem said, I am going to have to stand up because the Eved Melech is like a Melech. And Moshe Rabbeinu has the status of a king. And therefore, he doesn't have the right to give up on his honor. And therefore, I'm going to have to punish you to help you recognize that you have to be careful. When you're talking about Moshe, Moshe was the one that Moshe got this idea not from himself, but because I instructed him that he should stay here and he should not go back with his wife. And therefore, Miriam and Aaron had to go through this entire ordeal. Entirely different picture about how what we see from the story of Miriam and Aaron. And what a beautiful idea and lesson that we can just take from the Orach Chaim HaKadosh's perspective and how he proves it step by step. He didn't make anything up on his own. He shows the psukim, he shows the sifri and the midrashim that all support this take that he has, that is a very novel take on the psukim, is that when we see things, we can't always just take it at surface value. We have to take a look deeper inside. Is there another way to look at it? When we have human interactions that rub us the wrong way, we have to take a step back. What am I missing? What could I have seen differently or said differently that would have changed how I felt about it? What am I doing? When I look at something, what other way is there to see? So Moshe, obviously, the first stage of that is that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh looked at the psukim, and he didn't take it for granted the standard way we understand. He looked for a different understanding. But really, it was Miriam and Aaron. That was their lesson that they had to. That was the mistake, so to speak, that they made. They didn't take a deeper look and understand. Yeah, Moshe's our brother. Moshe's a prophet. We're prophets. And on the surface level, it seemed the same. If they would have taken a deeper look to understand, oh, Moshe is not just a regular prophet. There's something different about Moshe. Moshe is on call 24/7. Hashem could talk to him at any time. So then they would have seen the truth of who Moshe was and understood his perspective and understood how it wouldn't reflect poorly on previous generations, because nobody else had this relationship with Hashem. And therefore, Moshe was in the right for separating from his wife in this regard. And taking that extra moment to take a step back and look and understand just a little bit beyond the surface can be very enlightening and illuminating in order to help us understand each other and ourselves, for that matter. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and address them, and have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's kind of, it's fascinating. It is very kind of chutzpahdik. Almost, I would say, that sort of very traditional lashon hara interpretation. I mean, that's very. I mean,
In a
I think
sense,
it's
judgmental.
Yeah, it's just to kind of it's fascinating that there's such a such a different interpretation would be made, but that obviously makes complete sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The Chazal do learn many things of lashon hara from these psukim, so it's not off the wall, right? That is the pashut, the simple way to understand what was going on. But the fact that is an entirely different view from different sources in Chazal of how this what could have transpired is it's fascinating to see that we can't just you have to realize Miriam and Aaron were these people. Aaron walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur. He was the Kohen Gadol. He was a person that was appointed directly by Hashem. It's not a small individual, right? And Miriam as well. These great human beings, the likes of which we can't even comprehend. So we have to be very careful how we think of them and associate things to them.
So can we say then that their offense really because Moshe was expressing Hashem's will, and that their criticism of what he was doing was really criticism of Hashem, in effect. They were contradicting Hashem's will, and
in a sense,
their punishment arose out of that.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yes.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's everything. Really, the slight was to Hashem, because Hashem was really the one sticking up, right? Imagine a human king where somebody disrespects the human king's top official. So the king takes it personally. And
Right.
it doesn't happen to him, but it's because of it's such a relationship that he takes it personally. So it's a similar idea here. That's the idea of Eved Melech, the Eved of a king is like a king himself. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Yashar.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. It's good to
Yes,
see you.
everyone, please.
Be well.
Travis,
Yeah.
thank you.
Shabbos, Rabbi.
Shabbos.